Namaste. My name is Indra Dhoj, Assistant Professor, Faculty of Management, Tribhuvan University. So today I am here to make the discussions about the introduction part of the business environment, right? So business environment is one of the very important subject matters in the higher studies like in master's level, and it is also a very important subject even in the MPhil level of the studies. And this subject is also there in the bachelor level of the studies. The course Business Environment is basically designed to impart the very specific knowledge and skills that is required for the students, particularly to the managers, to handle the confronting situations that is related to the environmental circumstances. The nature of the course, however, as a manner of speaking, is the theoretical course, but the content of the business environment should be studied from the very pragmatic approaches. So there are a number of the contents in this subject. The first unit today that we are going to make the discussion about is introduction unit. Alright. So before starting the sessions about the introduction of the business environment, so there are some fundamental issues that the students should discuss in the class. They should understand, right? So this is about the fundamentals of the business environment analysis. For examples, how the organizations exist, survive and grow in today's environment. This is one issue. Another is, can the managers isolate the organizational activities from the impact of the environment? This is another one. Another issue, important issues that you should discuss, the students should understand is why the managers need to be dynamic. Why? Then, so what are the confronting issues the organizations are facing in relation to the environmental circumstances? And how do managers analyze their environmental forces affecting them? So these are some of the vital issues. So before starting the session of the introduction, the students should understand, should at least think, should give some time to think about these issues. For example, how organizations exist, survive and grow in today's time. So how does organization actually manage the different sets of the activities in relation to the organizational environment? And is it possible for the organizations? Can the organizations isolate their activities from the impact of the business environmental influences? The answer of this second issue is, it is never possible for the managers to isolate their organizational activities from the influences of the environmental factors. And why the managers need to be dynamic? The answer is very simple. The managers of today's organizations, they need to be dynamic. The logic is very simple because environment is very dynamic. It keeps on changing every time, in every quarter of the year. Even in every fraction of the second, environment keeps on changing. That is the reason why we should be dynamic. And some of the issues that we are facing, that the managers of today's organization facing, so what are the confronting issues, dynamic issues, emerging issues that we have to face, our managers are facing in today's contemporary time? There are lots of the issues relating to the environment. For example, the pattern and volume of the investment or the consumptions or the distributions have gone lots of the changes, right? So on the other hand, society is continually changing. There is the turbulent changes in the part of the technological advancements which have the dramatic effect in the life of the people and the organizations, right? And other issues are there. We are facing the unexpected issues like the COVID-19. And so many other cases are emerging day by day. So these are some of the confronting issues that today's managers have to handle. And there are very specific procedures, steps, methods, and approaches to be followed by the managers to handle the emerging environmental situations, to make the systematic assessment of environmental factors. So after understanding these vital issues or the fundamental aspect of the business environment analysis, now the students can start your discussions on the introduction of business environment analysis. What is business environment, right? Concept. So how you define the term business environment? You can read, business entities are the open system which cannot operate in the vacuum. Today's all the organizations are the open entities. So it is never possible for the organizations to operate in vacuum. Kunai pani organization le vacuum ma bhaneko without the influence of the organizational environment आफ्ना activitiesहरु conduct गर्न सक्दैन. Basically, why organizations exist in the market is very simple, because they have to satisfy the different types of the societal needs of the people in the society through the different economic spheres of the activities, right? So this is the basic understandings about the organizations. This is the business organizations and business environment. Another component you have to understand is the environment. Now, combining these two terms, business and environment, defining the term business environment now is very simple. Environment is surroundings that affect the businesses. Businesses has to act and interact with the different sets of the environmental factors. And summing these two words, business and environment. Business is the set of the economic activities that aims to satisfy the societal needs. Environment is the surrounding factors, environmental factors that affect the business activities. And business environment therefore it refers to the set of the factors within and outside of the organizations, and that factors actually affect the business performance, business organizations, future decisions of the organizations, and the different aspect of the organizations. So this is what business environment is. And there are a number of the things that the business environment includes. It includes many things in the organizational settings, like some of the things are internal to the organizations, for example, internal factors, internal affairs, for example, employees, capitals, resources, and there are some other factors which lie outside of the organization, outside the boundary of the organizations. These factors are the specific factors, and these other factors are the general factors. General and specific factors, both the factors are the outsider of the organizations. They are therefore the external environmental factors. Okay? And yes, as I said earlier, business has to exist, survive and grow in relation to the different environmental factors. And in order to handle those environmental factors, it is the responsibility of the managers that they have to come up with the very effective plans, policies, tools, techniques, and strategies to handle, to manage the environmental changes, to adapt the environmental changes. It is the responsibility of the managers. Yes. And as a matter of fact, we can say that no organization in today's time, they can survive without reacting the environmental factors. Yes. And whenever there are any changes that takes place in the environmental factors, so it is the entire responsibility of the organizations and the management to develop the adaptive framework which helps them to adapt the environmental changes. Because the slogan of today's time is what? Either you have to adapt the environmental changes or you have to let changes to adapt the organizations. If environment starts adapting the organizations, then there is the big question mark on the survival of the business firms. Therefore, every organization, no matter where they are located, irrespective of the type, size and nature, every organization has to develop the adaptive framework to cope up the environmental changes. Right? And for this, definitely, yes, managers need to understand the different dimensions, different aspects of the environmental factors. So after developing the fundamental concept of the business environment, so let us talk something about the features of business environment. So understanding the features of the business environment will help you to develop the concept of the business environment more clearly. So there are a number of the features you can state about the business environment. Some of the important features are, for example, it is the sum of all factors affecting the business organizations in different ways. So we have said earlier that there are several factors, many factors. All the factors, changes, events, or the circumstances, they are referred as the business environment. An environment is always unpredictable and it is highly dynamic. It keeps on changing. Environmental changes are very, very dynamic. All the time it keeps on changing. But the thing you have to understand, the thing the manager have to understand is the environmental changes cannot be exactly predicted. What you know is environment will change next year, after 6 months, after 3 years, after 3 months, whatever. Environment will change definitely, but we don't know to what extent the environment will change. So what are the basic things that will change in the futures? Because the nature of the environment is very, very dynamic. No one can have the exact anticipations of the environmental changes. हामी यो environment change के हुन्छ, कस्तो कस्तो change आउँछ भनेर हामी कहिल्यै पनि anticipate गर्न सक्दैनौं. जस्तो before 2019, December 19, no one had exact predictions about the COVID-19. COVID-19 यस्तो हुँदैछ, यसको इम्प्याक्ट एकदम मल्टिफेसेट्स हुनेवाला छ, ग्लोबल कन्टेक्स्टमा हुनेवाला छ भन्ने कुरा कसैले पनि एन्टिसिपेट गरेको थिएन इन द एक्ज्याक्ट म्यानर. बिकज इन्भाइरोमेन्टल चेन्जेसको नेचरै के हुन्छ, एकदमै अनप्रेडिक्टेबल हुन्छ, यो एकदमै डायनामिक हुन्छ, एकदमै कम्प्लेक्स हुन्छ. इट इज कम्पोज्ड अफ द सेभरल सेट्स अफ द फ्याक्टर्स. Therefore, understanding the environment is never simple for the managers. And changes in the environment brings both the things to the organizations, to the managers. It brings the positive aspect, that is the opportunities, and it simultaneously brings the negative aspect also. That is, some of the threats, risks, or the uncertainties are also the outcomes of the environmental changes. So managers need to be prepared accordingly to grab the opportunities in the market and to handle the emerging threat, risk, uncertainties that appears in the environmental changes. यसको लागि manager के हुनु पर्यो? The manager should always have the very proactive measures हुनु पर्यो, effective plan and policies हुनु पर्यो, strategies हुनु पर्यो. So with the help of those instruments, manager ले organization ले यस्ता changes हरूलाई handle गर्न सक्छन्, manage गर्न सक्छन् र एउटा adaptive framework develop गर्न सक्छन्. All right? Another point is, another features of business environment is the magnitude of the effect is different for the different organizations, right? Organizations will definitely be affected due to the environmental changes. But the thing is, to what level, to what extent organizations will be affected, that is different to the different organizations. For example, so the impact of the COVID-19 was almost uniform. That is, most of the economic activities of world, they were affected due to the COVID-19. But the level at which different sets of the economic activities were differently affected. If you talk about the tourism industries, it was almost near to collapse, right? But if you talk about the medical equipments, some of the health and sanitation equipments, they were least affected due to the COVID-19. Changes is same, that is the COVID-19, but the degree at which organizations were affected, that is different. You can give the several examples about the level or the degree of the magnitude of the impact of the environmental changes on the business performance in the different ways. Government pursues the various policies, different types of the economic policies, monetary policies, fiscal policies. Government changes those policies over the period of time as per the necessity of the country, economic necessity of the state or the government or the priorities of the government, right? But the impact is different for the different organizations. So whenever there are any changes in the monetary policies, so it is the bank and financial institutions, they get immediately affected. Right? तर अरू अर्गनाइजेसन्सहरु हेर्ने हो भने इम्प्याक्ट के हुन्छ, अलि डिस्टेन्टमा हुन्छ. त्यसको इम्प्याक्टको लेभल चाहिँ फरक हुन्छ. अनि एउटा अनदर इम्पोर्टेन्ट फिचर्स के छ, देयर इज द सिम्बायोटिक रिलेसनशिप बिट्विन द बिजनेस एन्ड अर्गनाइजेसन्स भन्ने हुन्छ. यसको मिनिङ चाहिँ के हो, टेक्निकल मिनिङ चाहिँ के हो भने, सो बिजनेसेस आर एफेक्टेड बाय द इन्भाइरोमेन्टल फ्याक्टर्स, दिस इज फाइन. एट द सेम टाइम, it is also important to understand that business also individually and collectively attempts to influence their operating environment, right? This is called symbiotic relationship between the business and their environment. So another topic in Unit 1 is the importance of business environment. I think some of the points are very clear over there that we have speaking about the introductory portion of the business environment. So another topic in the unit 1 is the importance of business environment. So be it the case of the MPhil level of studies or the master's levels or the bachelor level of the studies, so understanding the importance of the business environment is equally important. So only when you understand the importance or the significance of studying the business environment, you will develop the very, very good level of the knowledge and skills, basically the analytical skills from the systematic assessment of environmental factors. For example, there are a number of the benefits you can get from the systematic study of the business environment, right? As we have said earlier that business operates in a very dynamic and very complex sets of the environmental factors in today's time, right? And so it is also the very well-known fact that no organization can sustain, or it is very difficult for them to sustain, to grow, to develop without reacting the environmental factors. धेरै अर्गनाइजेसन्सहरु यस्तो छ जसले environmental changesहरुलाई exactly anticipate गर्न सकेनन्, manage गर्न सकेनन्, handle गर्न सकेनन् र gradually उनीहरु के भए disappear भए, exit out हुँदै गए, हैन? There is no presence of such organizations. Later on, we will be discussing about the few cases of those organizations who failed just because they did not respond their environmental changes, just because they did not develop the effective plan and policies relating to the environmental factors, and they did not understand the changing sentiment of the environmental factors. As a result, they failed and they are nowhere in today's time. All right? Yes. So therefore, what we can say is the success of the firms largely depends on the how effectively the organizations develop the adaptable framework within and outside of their organizations. Those organizations that develop the very effective, adaptable framework, very adaptive work cultures in the organizations, they can somehow manage, they can have the better management over the environmental changes. And in other side, those organizations who are not aware, who always believe in the reactive approaches of responding environmental changes, then definitely they will have to face the very tough time to survive, to sustain in the ever-changing local or the global environment. This is for sure. त्यही अर्गनाइजेसन मात्रै सर्भाइभ हुन सक्छ जुन अर्गनाइजेसनले आफ्नो इन्भाइरोमेन्टल चेन्जहरुलाई एकदम इफेक्टिभली, प्रोएक्टिभली, सिस्टमेटिकली, पिरियोडिकली ह्यान्डल गर्न सक्छ, म्यानेज गर्न सक्छ। त्यस्तो इन्भाइरोमेन्टल चेन्जेसहरुलाई म्यानेज गर्न, ह्यान्डल गर्नको लागि अर्गनाइजेसनले के गर्नु पर्यो? एउटा एडाप्टिभ फ्रेमवर्क डेभलप गर्नु पर्यो, and the development of the adaptive framework requires the very proper understandings about the different aspect of business environment. So this is also a very simple logic why the students like you should have the very good understanding about the different aspect of the business environmental factors. All right? Because the students of management will be the managers in the near futures. They will be the policy makers, and you have to handle the emerging situations, confronting issues in the real work settings in the organizations. At that time, you have to handle all those changes that takes place within your organizations and outside of your organizations. And that type of the knowledge, confidence, skills comes from the systematic understanding of business environment. All right? Yes, the proper knowledge about the changing environment makes the managers proactive and vigilant, right? You will be paying the very close monitoring, very close attentions about the environmental changes. तपाईं जहिले पनि proactive हुनुहुन्छ. Reactive approach does not always work. Managers अहिले कस्तो हुनुपर्छ? They should always have the proactive approach हुनु पर्यो. अनि अपडेट गराइराख्छ इन्भाइरोमेन्टल चेन्जसँग म्यानेजर्सलाई, अर्गनाइजेसन्सलाई अपडेट गराउँछ. त्यसो भयो भने काइन्ड अफ भिजिलेन्ट भनेको वाचडग जस्तो भइराखेको छ हैन अर्गनाइजेसन्सहरु अहिले जसले सिस्टमेटिकली आफ्नो इन्भाइरोमेन्टल असेसमेन्ट गरिराखेका हुन्छन्. Yes. So we have stated so many importance of the significance of business environment analysis. So that discussions can also be enumerated in the forms of the points. For example, some of the important points can be stated as, yes, systematic study and analysis of the business environment helps to identify and analyze the sort of the organizations in ever-changing environment. Perhaps many students have the very good idea about the SWOT analysis, right? So there are many students who have completed their project work in the different organizations based on the SWOT analysis framework. So organizational strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. The systematic assessment of strength, weakness, opportunity, and threat. That is the basis of the environmental analysis. Because what do you do in the environmental analysis is, after having the systematic assessment about the changing environmental circumstances, you can come up with the very empirical type of findings. That is, you will be able to state the specific strength of the organizations, weaknesses of the organizations, threats of the organizations, and the opportunities of the organizations. The thing what you have to understand is, if you have the systematic analysis of the internal factors within the organizations, then you will come up with the organizational strength and weaknesses. As long as you also systematically analyze the external factors, external environmental factors, which are the outsider of your organizations, then you will come up with the opportunities and threats. What kind of the opportunities are available in the market for you, and what are the threats that organizations have to face in today's time. So this idea comes from the systematic study of business environment. Yes, you are seeing another important points right here. It is the foundation of the strategy formulation. यसको meaning चाहिँ के हो भने, no strategy can be formulated without developing the environmental assessment profile. म्यानेजर्सहरूले आफ्नो इन्भाइरोमेन्टल रियालिटिज असेसमेन्ट गरिसकेपछि एउटा प्रोफाइल डेभलप गरिराखेको हुन्छ. त्यो प्रोफाइल बेस्ड भएर डिसिजन्स आर टेकन, स्ट्राटेजिज आर फर्मुलेटेड. लेट अस सपोज तपाईँले कुनै अब स्ट्राटेजीहरू यु आर अबाउट टु फर्मुलेट द भेरी इफेक्टिभ डिफ्रेन्ट अर्डर्स अफ द स्ट्राटेजिज इन युर अर्गनाइजेसन्स, बट यु इग्नोर द स्टेप अफ द इन्भाइरोमेन्टल assessment, environmental analysis, right? So what will be the possible consequences? The consequences of ignoring the environmental assessment, the cost of ignoring the environmental analysis will be very, very high for you. The strategies which are formulated without the systematic analysis of the environment, they cannot be put into actions for the implementations. Even if managers attempt to put it into the implementations, so there are probabilities of deviations, high deviations in the actual implementations, right? Because the organizations always want to attain the specific goals, specific objectives. In order to realize that goals and objectives, what organizations need is strategies. At the different levels, at the different orders, they formulate the organizational strategy. And before formulating the organizational strategy, so it is very important to have the systematic assessment of environmental factors, right? So another point is here, in order to understand the direction of growth and the direction of the change in the industry, every managers have to understand the environmental changes, environmental factors. Yes, so without having the systematic knowledge about the environmental factors, you cannot know the direction of growth and direction of change in the environment. And yes, so understanding the business environment analysis is very, very important to take the first mover advantage. First mover advantage means you will be taking the advantage ahead of your competitors in the first phase. That is, before taking the advantage by other competitors, if you want to take the advantage of the market opportunities, actually market provides the enormous opportunities for the organizations. And it is up to you, up to the managers, up to the organizations, whether they can take that level of, that skill of the opportunities before other competitors. That is called first mover advantage. And in order to take the first mover advantage, so it is very important to have the systematic analysis of environmental factors. For example, Pokhara has taken the enormous opportunity of the first mover advantage. For example, people in the American market, that people also took the enormous opportunities as the first mover advantage, particularly in the COVID time, right? So Bhatbhatini supermarket, this is taking the first mover advantage in the departmental chain stores type of the businesses, right? So there are so many other examples. For example, IMS softwares, that is also taking the first mover advantage in billing systems, right? In the different departmental stores, in the restaurants, they are also developing the softwares for the pension distributions in the different embassies. So they are taking the basically the first mover advantage, all right? eSeva is also taking the first mover advantage. So who is taking the first mover advantage before other competitors are taking the advantage in the market is, it is those organizations which understand their environmental factors and their realities more accurately than their competitors. This is also important. And the further radar effect, that is early detection of the threat and the risk. It is very important to understand the environmental factors. All right. Radar effect means, so how does a pilot take the decisions about, the hold the plane, right, or take off the plane or the land the plane? On what basis? So pilot makes the decision on the basis of the signals he gets from the radar that is installed in the airport, every airport, right? So it means what? Understanding the business environment helps manager, helps organization to detect the threat, possible threats. If you understand the extent to which your organization is going to be affected, or if you make the anticipation about the possible threat, possible risk that is approaching to you in the near futures, then you can reduce, you can minimize the impact of that risk. And for this, you have to understand the business environment. That is called radar effect. Okay? And there is one equation written over here, right? It is S equals to, S means organizational success, and this is abbreviated by the S, capital S. Organizational success is the functions of the organizational efficiencies, OE, plus marketable product, MP, plus differentiating strategy, DS, and this is in the small bracket, and you are seeing the one more terminology, that is one more abbreviated form, that is EA. EA stands for the environmental adaptation or the environmental analysis. If you assign the values respectively for the operational excellence or the organizational excellence or the efficiencies, right, marketable product and differentiating strategy, then you will come up with the certain values. For example, you can assign 1 to 10 for the respectively for three these components. Organizational efficiency, suppose it is 5 on average. Marketable product that you have, suppose the value of the marketable product is also 5, and differentiating strategy. Let us again suppose, for simplicity, the value of differentiating strategy is 5. So what it makes is 5 plus 5 plus 5 is, it makes 15, right? The value of the organizational success is the functions of the 15, it is some kind of the value you can assign for the different components. And there is EA, environmental adaptation, environmental analysis, in the multiple of the sum of these factors, sum of the values that you calculated earlier. Remember, it was 15, right? And suppose you put the value 1, right? And here is 5. Here is, suppose the value of O is 5 plus marketable product is 5 and differentiating strategy is 5. Altogether it is 15. 5 plus 5 plus 15. And in multiple of this, so we have environmental assessment. You can assign the values of environmental adaptation or the environmental analysis from 1 to 5 scales. If it is 1, suppose the total value is 15. If it is 2, the value will be 30. If it is 4, the value will be 60. That is, those organizations which have the systematic assessment of the environmental factors, they always have the better probability of organizational success. those organizations will be the successful organizations in the futures which develop the very systematic framework of environmental adaptations. So this equation can also be equated with the probability of success, chances of success in the market, in the industries. All right. So these are a few examples that elaborate the importance of the business environment. I think that I think it is very simple to understand these things that we are discussing here. Yes, the importance of business environment can also be understood from the risk-return trade-offs. Most probably, most of the students can understand the meaning of risk-return trade-offs that you study in the financial studies, right? Different areas of the financial studies, for example, in investment management. So there is one topic that you have to study that you have understood, that is the risk-return trade-off. For this also, a systematic assessment of the environmental factor is very, very important, because you want to optimize the expected returns at the given level of the risk, or you want to minimize the risk level of the risk at the given level of the returns, right? This is called the theories of risk returns. And for this also, so systematic assessment of the environmental factor is very, very important. All right. So these are two things that we discussed earlier. One is about the introduction part of the business environment and the features. Second is the importance of business environment analysis. Why this is important for the managers, why this is important for the policymakers. So there is one more topic in the introduction unit, that is business environment system. So this topic will be dealt in another class. Okay? Okay, thank you.